Well, we'll make a start then. It's
Okay.
really, yeah, really great that we can have this, well, another webinar. We've had quite a few of these this year, and we try to do one every month if we can. And we're approaching the end of the year, of course, so it's nice that we can finish off with a really special webinar as well, and a great guest speaker we've got from Kedge Business School. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, you're based over in Bordeaux or Marseille, isn't it?
Well, I'm in Bordeaux at the moment on our sister campus, but my port of attachment, as it were, is Marseille. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, really glad you could join us today. So thanks. Well, thanks again. And this webinar is all about well, how a triple accredited business school creates the entrepreneurs of tomorrow using business simulations. So really keen to get into the conversation. We'll be covering some things like some of the issues, of course, around delivering business education at a Grand Ecole. For example, getting students to engage, and how simulations have been used and can be used to kind of address some of those issues as well. Specifically at Kedge, how you've implemented and how you use the simulation as well. Also, some more specific, tangible things like linking to assessment, and then we'll hopefully have some time for some final thoughts and Q&A as well. So really keen to get into the conversation. Before I start, I think you can see this welcoming slide, which I've got up on the screen here, but I'll just take a few minutes just to kind of give a bit of a background to the simulations. Perhaps we have some guest speakers, for example, who aren't familiar too much with simulations. So just so we're on the same footing a little bit. By the way, I'm Leon Lloyd. I'm head of sales with Edumundo, based in the UK in the southwest of England. And well, looking forward to getting into the conversation. So just to say very briefly is that, well, we have a wide portfolio of different simulations used at about 400 business schools worldwide. And they're really covering most business school subjects. But having said that, there are some commonalities. So they're all web-based, for example, and can be used on any device. And typically we put students into teams of about 3, 4, or 5 in a team. And those students then will manage their own virtual company across a number of virtual years or rounds. So it's really great experience for them, really gives them a chance to kind of apply that subject matter theory. It's highly competitive because it's a dynamic algorithm, meaning that the student teams are competing against other student teams on the same course. So it really engages students, and they kind of really get that relevance and sense of, yeah, they can make sense of the theory. We can cater for all student levels, actually right from kind of foundation level all the way up to master's level as well. And a number of our simulations are very flexible, meaning that we can align them quite well with the different learning outcomes on your course. So typically what we find is that the simulations are often used to improve things like student engagement and satisfaction, some of the things we'll be talking about today. But also where used strategically can also really have a big impact on continuation rates and retention, as well as, of course, it's not just about the specific learning outcomes on the course that the simulation sits on. It's also about more generally the development of the competencies and the soft skills as well, employability skills. And we often see that students will use the simulations also as part of their marketing efforts, to really wow students that this is what they can expect when they come to students as part of the kind of student offer recruitment. So I won't talk too much more, but just to kind of say, like, for future reference, and well, we'll put some contact details later in the presentation, in the session, but we have a wide range of different simulations. If you'd like to explore any of them in detail with us, then feel free to get in touch. And these are some of the subjects that we've successfully embedded simulations onto, but it's not an exhaustive list, of course. There's plenty of other subjects. So please get in touch if you'd like to discuss any of that. Okay. Well, perhaps it's useful to maybe start by just asking you, Tim, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could just give us a bit of introduction to your role at Kedge, and also like how long you've been there, for example, and the subjects you teach. That would be great.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim White. I'm originally from Ireland, but I grew up in London and Johannesburg. And I took an undergraduate degree in London and then a postgrad at Aix-en-Provence, near to where I live. And I've been working at Kedge Business School since 1992. I'm one of the old hands. But alongside my career as an educator, I've also worked in executive education, but more particularly in the software industry in marketing. And I co-founded a company that was one of the pioneers in knowledge management software back in the early 2000s. Now I'm basically head of gaming and simulation on one of the major campuses within the Kedge group. Just a quick word about Kedge, which is the result of a merger between the business schools of Marseille and Bordeaux. And since we merged in 2013, we've also developed other campuses, associate campuses all over France, but also overseas in Shanghai and Suzhou in China, and Dakar and Abidjan in West Africa. Okay. Now, I started off basically on supply chain management and overall, general business policy. And I gravitated progressively more towards simulations, and it's now like 90% of what I do. I teach one other remote strategy course, but basically gaming and simulation is my primary concern on the Marseille campus. And I work with Edumundo, but also with a certain number of French gaming suppliers. There's a company called Bsoft based in Aix, another company called Arcade based in Bordeaux, and we also work with Sesim, the Finland-based simulation supplier as well. So we've got quite a broad range of games and simulations that we use here in the school. A lot of what we do is induction for onboarding students. Our first glimpse of management education, where we kind of get them to unlearn the school method and become familiar with a method where there's a lot more engagement and a lot more self-reliance that's required. And the other major typology is validation, mainly at the end of bachelor programs. It's generally the last class they take before they go on internship. Now, what we've kind of developed usually here is a simulation methodology where we pack it into a 4-day seminar where it's relatively intense. They're taking 2 to 3 decisions a day, sometimes more. They're also doing other activities which contribute to the evaluation. Generally speaking, my modus operandi is to give maybe 40% of the overall evaluation to a game score, and then other deliverables, business plans, presentations, intermediary presentations, logo development, advertising development. Those are other activities which are graded. And of course, there's a final report where what we ask generally is for a relatively limited slide deck, because no one wants to plow their way through 40, 50 slides in relation to a simulation, but basically where they will describe the situation in which they started, in the case of the simulation that we're going to focus on today, which is the sneakers simulation for entrepreneurship. So starting position, performance during the game, recommendations for a new team of management coming in. Okay. Now, what we ask them to do, I mean, in terms of those deliverables, we ask them to put it on video as well. So there's one exercise which is particularly useful, which is the elevator pitch deliverable. So what we do is, about halfway through the game and say, okay, You started off this simulation with a certain amount of capital. Now you need to increase that capital by 20%. So we sort of script it. So you guys have got to make a 4-minute pitch that you're going to upload to the new TikTok channel set up by a grouping of venture capitalists. And it's got to be coherent with your position. And basically, there's the potential for an additional $1 million in capital, which is starting capital is 5 million, I believe, in that simulation. So you can increase your capital by 20%. But everyone gets a fair shake. I mean, if it's moderately good, we'll give them 200,000. If it's satisfactory, we'll give them 6, and if it's really top notch, we'll give them $1 million. Okay, so that's another assignment, and it's a relatively good simulation of reality, because we send them down to we've got a pretty good incubator here in Kedge, Marseille. We send them down there, we get them up on the little mini stage, and they have to pitch it as if they were at one of these sort of speed dating kind of events where you have investors and project leaders coming together, and the investors are doing their shopping, and the project leaders are basically looking for cash. Okay.
Well, it's really great to hear, Tim, and it really kind of sounds like this kind of more applied approach. So moving away from the more kind of traditional teaching methods and getting more into kind of simulations, applied experiential approaches to delivering the curriculum is something that's really been embraced at Kedge. Would you say that's a fair kind of synopsis?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair comment. And when you look at student evaluations and then end of year studies, the business simulations are one of the things that kind of jump out of the verbatim reports from these studies. And generally speaking, it is pretty well liked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just got a question from John there. Well, in our school, we've got 38 different programs. We've got a flagship program, which is called the Programme Grand Ecoles, where it's admission after competitive examination. But we also have a national bachelor program where it's mainly French recruits. The program I've been working on with the Edumundo simulation is an international bachelor program, which has its own challenges. I mean, we have students from France, Germany, Russia, Kazakhstan, Senegal, Ireland. A very, very mixed bunch, very, very, very diverse community. And they enjoy this. One of the things that is particularly relevant is like the accounting system is much closer to IFRS, whereas on exclusively French programs, we have simulations which have, how shall I put this? It looks very much like a French tax return, the accounting,
Well, that's really interesting, actually, Tim. Sorry, just to jump in, is we're actually just in the process of making some really, really significant updates to the financial documents within the simulations as well, to make them even more aligned with IFRS than they were previously. But it's great to hear already that, I suppose compared to the French, the French financial documents, typically, then, they're already looking quite closer to IFRS, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, objectively, where the French simulations are very good are on their mechanisms for things like sales tax and VAT collection, and for corporate tax collection. The students really have to develop their tools in order to get good financial forecasting together, depending on whether their financial conditions are we pay at 30 days end of month or 60 days end of month or whatever. Okay. And the other thing is it's kind of specific to the French taxation system, where you pay a provisional advance and then you settle up at the end of the year.
So just taking a step back a little bit. So obviously, Kedge is well, triple accredited business school, so
Yeah.
it has the triple crown, AACSB, Amber, and Equus, which is great, and we're delighted to work with Kedge, of course, as we are with all our clients. But so it's quite a prestigious business school, I would say, isn't it? And perhaps would you say something a little bit about for maybe for some of our guests who aren't familiar with the French system, like what is a Grand Ecole and how that's a little bit different, perhaps, to other universities?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, you have a programme Grand École, which is based on a competitive examination. And admission in first year is after a 2-year foundation course. And then there's a ranking, which is developed. There's like a centralized organization that ranks all of the students on given competitive examinations. And yeah, students recruited on competitive examinations generally pretty strong. There's also a parallel admission system where people can come in once they've obtained a bachelor's degree from the university. They can join that program in the second year. And it's what they call a parallel admission scheme. You also have sometimes people from a more technical background or a science background who are looking for a kind of dual qualification to back up their technical skills with some management skills as well. Then you have other programs. The program we work on is competitive examination for admission in France in years 1 and 2, and parallel admissions generally from overseas as of year 3. Okay, it's a 4-year program. But the people who will start here in France will do years 1 and 2 in France, and then go to 1 or 2 partner institutions, depending on whether they're looking at a double degree or not. Yeah. Okay. There's another program which is like an international master's program, where that is the double degree is mandatory. And then we have a whole battery of postgrad diplomas, masters, specialized masters in a very, very wide range of subjects. We have recognized expertise in supply chain, in industrial purchasing. A lot of these programs are supported by apprentissage, which is like mixed classroom learning and in-company experience cycles. And yeah, we have 15,000 students in total across all campuses. And I think in terms of numbers, we're probably number 2 in the country. We're ranked 8th in France. To explain how the French system works, you've got like a first division, which is Parisian schools plus a school in Lyon, plus a school in Lille called l'EDEC. And the classifications are fairly, I mean, it's very, very difficult. It'd be like, for us to get up to number 4 or 5, it'd probably be like trying to break into the Ivy League in the States. And, I don't think we can do that, but we're defending a fairly comfortable position just below the Premier League, if you will pardon the football metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Well, John, you feel free to let us know if your question's been answered. If you want us to expand on anything, then just feel free to let us know. But great. Okay. Tim, I know when we've talked before, I was really interested to hear your views about. I think you were saying around how, like, generally a lot of the incoming students nowadays, they kind of have a certain view about entrepreneurship, and sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge for you in trying to deal with how they're kind of viewing the subject of entrepreneurship, which was actually a little bit of a surprise for me hearing that, because I think typically I assume that, like, the subject of entrepreneurship is something that students can get on board with quite easily, and they really embrace it. But I think your experience would say otherwise a little bit. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about that, but also I think more generally about the expectation shift you were talking about as well. So in terms of, more generally what students expect when they come to do their their higher education, and also, I suppose, what their expectations of the ongoing workplace will be after graduating as well. So I don't know if you want to say some things about those points.
Well, I would say, generally speaking, in France, the level of student participation in classroom debate is significantly lower than in the English-speaking world. Yeah. Okay. French students will tend to only intervene when they're certain that they're right. Yeah. Okay. Making a fool of oneself in public, it's something that they're a little bit disinclined to do. And culturally, French business schools there's always been entrepreneurship and guys doing projects, but the majority of people have come through the system expecting to work their way into a position where they can be fairly sure of leaving and getting a position as a management accountant with a major national or international firm, or with a fairly large, medium-sized firm. And entrepreneurship has, not been stimulated in the same way as it has been in institutions elsewhere. I mean, we got on board very, very late with the notion of incubators. I mean, now it's been given the resources, and people are full on, and the students with projects get support. They get housed in the incubator. They get access to legal advice. They get access to a network of investors, venture capitalists, whatever. But when in the early days, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an incubator, but it wasn't in our school. It was in the university, which is just across the road. And it was incubating projects that came from an engineering school that was housed within the university, which was specialized in IT projects and biotechs. And our guys in the business school had to go over the road and get the support from the incubator directors over there. Obviously, I mean, there were some members of the faculty who were going over there and helping out, coaching, providing a certain amount of technical assistance to projects. But yeah, the approach to entrepreneurship has changed over maybe the past 10, 15 years. We've had an incubator for the best part of I think it was 2013 when it was first established in Marseille, and now we've got large incubation structures on the two major campuses in Marseille and Bordeaux. And this reflects itself in an attitude to entrepreneurship in class, which was not necessarily very enthusiastic. Yeah. Okay. And a lot of entrepreneurship classes consisted of maybe 1/3 of theoretical input, how to start a business, how to prepare a business plan, how to approach investors, how to pitch, and then a practical demonstration on a project of their own. Now, this was very, very frustrating, particularly maybe 10 years ago, when the phone app revolution was thrust upon us, because basically, I would say 70% of the projects were based on smartphone apps. Now, the problem is, someone who knows this industry relatively well, my son's a vice president of one of the major phone app marketers in the United States, a company called AppLovin, and what he said is, 80% of applications fail. Okay, and they fail pretty quickly, and they demand massive amounts of resources. And one of the reasons to move towards a simulation-based approach to entrepreneurship was to get us out of this rut, because I mean, you have to allow students a certain amount of latitude on their choice of project, but all of the projects were going basically down the same road, and leading to very frustrating outcomes from a teaching point of view, and I think from a learning point of view. Okay. I hope I've answered your
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
your
Well,
question satisfactorily.
I was just thinking, actually, I used to work for another company, and it wasn't really the official kind of strapline by any means, but it was like an internal kind of team motto, which was like fail fast, essentially. And it was really kind of trying to embrace this idea that, it's okay to fail, and trying to kind of, like bring a recognition that, by only through failure will you succeed, isn't it? And so I
Yeah.
think that kind of, I really kind of
Yeah.
thought about that as you were talking there, because the simulations also really kind of strongly allow this kind of safe space, isn't it, for students to kind of come in and just start doing things, start taking decisions, and getting comfortable taking decisions, because ultimately any decision is better perhaps than no decision, and at least it's kind
Yeah.
of getting students used to that. So like often we can learn the most through failure, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll just react to what John said there. I think, there was a lot of that in the past, and we were slow to get on board. But the catch up is happening relatively quickly through incubation structures, through the development of a certain number of focused business clusters. For example, there's one on medical care down in the south of France. There's another one based on perfume industry in Grasse. There was one based close to Marseille on the integrated circuits business, because we have Gemalto and Atmel, two of the ST Microelectronics, three of the largest semiconductor components producers internationally. So I mean, it's not France is not a centralized state-run economy. It's a mixed economy with probably more emphasis going towards the private sector now, and the state progressively has withdrawn from a lot of those major industrial concerns.
Well, I was just thinking, like, as well, you've got entrepreneurship in the sense of, well, starting new companies, spotting opportunities, startups, but also, wouldn't you say as well, Tim, that, entrepreneurship is also a skill, like, or it's a set of skills, like the entrepreneurial skill set, which can be applied within a big corporate as well. And then it's just got a different term, which is intrapreneurship, but it's essentially the same thing. It's about how you kind of can, how you act and your attitude, and how you interact with colleagues, and how you work.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, it's about basically running a business unit, and there's stuff you learn in a simulation about starting a business that you can redeploy elsewhere. Okay, and the fundamentals don't change. I mean, managing your working capital requirement during an intense growth period, as you have to do in the entrepreneurship simulation. Well, you don't have to be in a startup system to have to acquire that skill. Okay, the only real weakness in the simulation, because all simulations have elements that are a little bit detached from reality. The only real element that's contestable in the entrepreneurship simulation is the fact that they get a 5 million euro envelope to start up with, and that's when you talk about a seed capital of 5 million, that would be unblocked progressively as different milestones are reached. And in reality, if you weren't reaching those milestones, you'd probably have your investors with some sort of plan to buy you out and put a new management team in there. Yeah. It's very complex to simulate, but that's
Yeah. Let's see John's comment there as well about Elon Musk.
Yeah.
No, but all of that is it's possible to change, of course, in the simulation, just in terms of how we set it up, though, of course, Tim, right? So if you think it's more realistic to set each team up with a smaller initial amount of funding, that's perfectly possible. That's just all done by our operations team when we set the simulation up. And and it's also possible then each round to have these kind of certain stages where maybe more investment is injected into the
Mm.
business, is potentially in response to how well teams are performing in, for
Yeah.
example, investor pitches or something like that. So yeah, like if you'd like to have a little look at that, maybe tweaking how it's set up a little bit, then yeah, please feel free to have a chat with your assigned operations manager.
Yeah, I mean that would be interesting. I mean, it's not a major a major problem. It doesn't interfere with the functioning of the simulation. I mean, we have much bigger departures from reality in other simulations where, for example, the cost of finished products stocked is kind of overlooked, and there's very much a focus on the industrial thing. I've got much more of a problem with something like that than the way the startup capital is handled in
Yeah,
your
okay.
sneaker simulation. Yeah?
But like on the flip side, like the one you're using is kind of positioned more as a startup company because it's of course more of an entrepreneurship focus. But on the very flip side, to give a kind of quite opposing example, we can also set that very same simulation up in a much different way, which would be more of like a business consultancy kind of way, where
Mm-hmm.
every student team would start with many more previous rounds of trading history,
Mm-hmm.
potentially also in quite a bad way. So the financials are looking quite bad, the sales history is quite bad. There's essentially they're coming
Yeah.
into it as consultants. They have to do a whole range of analysis and work out how they'll turn around their company and then pitch to the owners of the company as if they've come up with a plan of how to turn the company around. So I'm just giving that as an example to say that that even that's within the same simulation. But there's a
Yeah.
whole range of tweaks that we can make to really make it a completely different experience for students.
Yeah, I mean, what's important is to build a battery of different scenarios that can be applied. Because I mean, I'll just refer back to the previous webinar on AI.
Hmm.
It looks to me as if we're going to have to totally change our approaches to assessment, um, given what's happening with ChatGPT and other AI tools. I mean, what is interesting in the simulation approach is that you get a fairly unique set of data to each situation, and the way people perform within the simulation is going to change those data sets and the way that the competing firms are going to have to react. Okay, I mean, I've had scenarios where there's been one firm out of six that's gone on a volume driven approach, and five out of six have gone on a specialized or what you refer to as the customer intimacy approach. There's basically three business models that work in this simulation. But of those five, 3 out of 5 have done appropriate research and development investments,
Yeah.
and they've succeeded. And the other two were too slow off the mark, and they got dropped from the overall competition and were struggling to keep their heads above water for 2 or 3 decisions at the end. Not necessarily a bad thing, because when a simulation is too easy and people win it hands down, I think there's a risk of them maybe getting a little bit overconfident. But someone who's taken a big fall and then recovered from it, they tend to benefit a lot more from this type of simulation. Yeah?
Yeah, no, completely. Well, I think maybe then, Tim, just a good opportunity just to mention for anyone who missed it, for any of our attendees here today who missed our last webinar, it was all about, yeah, as Tim says, it was all about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and the implications on assessment, but also in the context of simulations. And we had some great guest speakers from Greenwich Business School in London. So Dr. Gerard Christandel and Emma Connor, and they were really talking about their experiences of using our simulations at Greenwich, and also, in response to kind of being asked to provide a grading system to their assessments to really, outline how AI proof their assessments were. So yeah, it was really interesting, and I think as you've said, Tim, it's all about, like, well, an integral piece there is about the fact that each student team is working with a completely unique data set. So it's very hard to for ChatGPT to kind of, well, it's very hard to just to cheat essentially on your assessment without
Yeah.
some real, perhaps you can still use AI to support you in your assessment, but you still have to do it in a way where you're prompting the artificial intelligence in the right way. So
but they will try. I mean, I had a recent experience where one of the externalities that we inject into the game is letters from the bank manager where the firm is overdrawn, and basically you are 500,000 overdrawn. Would you like to explain yourself? That's the basic tone of the letter. And someone sent back to us a letter which had obviously been generated by ChatGPT, but in a rather Clouseau-like way. They'd forgotten to change the date. So you have date and then suspension points in brackets in the middle of this letter. We were, nice try, boys, but you're going to have to do better than that.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a
Yeah.
question from John about induction. Well, when these students come in for basically onboarding, we're the first people they see. Our team. And basically what we do is we gather them together in a lecture theatre. There's no formal preparation. They get an introductory brief. They get an online manual. And then we coach them through an initial preparation phase. And what I always like to do is to have a trial decision or two so they can get used to the different levers in the game where they can test what kind of happens if we put prices up 15%. What happens if we reduce our sales force? What's the real impact of our communication budget? And it's particularly interesting on the Edumundo simulations, because you've got quite a complex battery of online and offline marketing initiatives that you can deploy. Okay. Now, in a lot of earlier games that I started on, sales was basically price, dedicated advertising budgets for the corporate brand, and then for the products, and then commission-based sales. Okay. Now, on what Edumundo does, there's a whole bunch of online options, retargeting, banner advertising, along with the traditional stuff, the 4x3, the below the line communications, whatever. So you've got depending on the market that you're aiming at, you've got maybe 10 different options that you can envisage, and that needs to be explained. Sometimes we'll before they actually get onto decision making, we'll give them a mini workshop on online offline marketing, on how to stimulate sales, how to do a sales forecast. I mean, it's pretty rudimentary because these kids are just out of high school, but just to give them some orientation, we'll get them to work on that, and then we'll hopefully iron out any operational problems on those first one or two trial decisions, so that they can see the mechanism in action and act accordingly.
Exactly. And I think so I would second that, really, Tim. We often do these induction simulations, but also for different levels as well. So we even do quite a lot of these induction simulations at MSc level, for example, where we'll dedicate the whole day to a simulation, or perhaps do it over 2 days, for example. So we're interspersing other activities. So it's not just the simulation, but it might be a little bit of something else going on, just to kind of break things up a little bit. But But where we do some of the perhaps more lower level inductions, perhaps in the UK, like foundation level 3 or level 4 inductions, typically we'll often do those for an afternoon or a morning, for example, over maybe 3 hours. And I would completely agree. Just a little introduction at the start, maybe half an hour or something, to introduce generally, to explain what students will be expected to do in their teams, and then just letting them loose, really.
Mm.
And it's also learning by doing, not only for the application of the theory, but it's also learning by doing about the simulation as well. Like, you're clicking around and you're kind of finding out how the simulation works. But exactly as you said, Tim, we can set up one of these trial rounds, if you like, as well, where they'll have a whole round dedicated to just kind of seeing how things work, and then we reset everything, and so it's completely no risk round, and they can start from scratch. Having said that, my personal kind of view is a little bit that the whole thing, of course, is a simulation. So the whole thing is a practice for real life anyway. So unless you've got some really big weightings attached to the assessment on the simulation score itself, then
Yeah.
I would say a trial round isn't per se necessary, but it depends what you want to do and the approach.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I've seen a certain number of scenarios on different simulations where I've run, where maybe something has been omitted, or the students haven't necessarily read the manual particularly well, and there are fatal mistakes that are made. And sometimes you get a situation where a team of guys have taken 3 decisions, and problem is they're in a hole, and you don't have a ladder to offer them. I mean, all you could offer them more shovels and say, keep digging, guys. And I've had situations where I've had to recapitalize firms to try and get them out of that hole, and it's been uphill traffic. And if you're on a 3-day simulation, and you've lost the changing room, as they say in rugby, it can be a long and pretty arduous process to keep these guys focused and keep them on board.
It's a really important point, actually, because you can get to a certain point in the simulation, isn't it, where you've got a whole load of teams that are really doing well. You've got, of course, the ones in the middle, but then you can have some which are really falling behind, isn't it, at the bottom? And
Yeah.
if those ones are starting to see that their own position on that ranking list, they've got no hope at all of winning, then there is a risk that they can start to disengage and kind of think, well, what's the point in carrying on? But it's really crucial that we're keeping an eye on that and addressing that as we're going forward. And so that's why we'll typically try to offer some really personalized kind of tips and tricks to some of those struggling teams halfway through the simulation, so that they can really try to get out of that hole a little bit and still be within a chance. It's also worth no, go on, Tim.
Yeah, so sorry, it's just one of those things, is that the rankings can be a double-edged sword. Okay, there's the aspect that if a team is falling behind or having a hard time of it, they can get into a situation where they lose the motivation. But on the other hand, you have some who are so focused on the ranking that they're micromanaging in order to score ranking points. Okay, and that can be problematic. Now, what we do on your simulation to counter that is, okay, we've got a big 40% block of the final grade, which is based on game scores, but we split it in 2. We use your ranking on the points system that's present in the game for 50%, but then we use our ranking, which is based on more standard KPIs: return on sales, return on asset, return on equity, debt leverage situation, ability to generate free cash flow to finance investments, that kind of battery of indicators, and that counts for 50% as well. Okay, because I mean that it will stop people playing a game, or gaming the simulation, if you like, in order to win with a very, very strong socially responsible policy, but with a return on asset that's worthy of the French post office. Yes, they've got to keep the economic indicators and the social responsibility indicators on a reasonably even footing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's also worth kind of reminding ourselves, isn't it, that even coming back to what we were saying earlier, like you can often learn the most through failure as well, isn't it? So it shouldn't be
Very
the
much
case
so.
that, if you do come completely at the bottom of the ranking list, that you're penalized too much, because ultimately it's about the reflection on the learning experience. And I think that's what really needs to come through quite strongly. So I would say most of our clients will assess through the simulation, perhaps with a small allocation of points on the ranking list, but if so, only a small
Yeah.
proportion. And generally then it's mostly through the individual reflective written report, or some combination of that, and a group presentation perhaps as well. But it was really interesting to hear what you were saying earlier at the start, in fact, about how you're assessing your students through this, because you've mentioned things like these presentations, these investor pitches and things like that. And it was really, again, reminding me about this previous webinar about where Emma Grench was talking about authentic assessments and things, and actually how we need to move more towards that approach, really. But it sounds like you're already employing quite a lot of authentic approaches to assessment, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I've actually been there. I've actually had to go in and pitch for some of my extracurricular projects. So, I like to bring that experience. I mean, it was a different time. It was the beginning of the internet boom, but I like to bring that experience to the table, and get them thinking about if there's real money at stake here, how am I going to approach it? And most of them approach it very very seriously, with a lot of application. Yeah. Similarly, on the final presentation, it's a short report plus video. Yeah. We will tend to say, okay, I want a presentation with 10 core slides, and if you think that more slides are necessary, you can write them, but they will be considered as a backup, which you would refer to should you be questioned on that. And you will accompany it with a conf call presentation for a new management team or new investors. Okay, so that means that information that's contained in the 10 slides will have to be put across in a video format, as if they were doing a conf call with I don't know, private equity and other shareholders interested in investing in the company. So keeping it short and to the point, very important. Getting students at this stage to produce massive decks of slides, I'm not persuaded that it's pedagogically speaking the best thing. Yeah. I've had conversations with banks and investors on this. I had recently the opportunity to exchange with someone from Commerzbank in Germany, and said if it's more than 10 slides, it goes in the in tray and it gets another another deck of 40, 50 slides dumped on top of it. It never gets read. Yeah. So yeah, getting the teams to focus on what's very, very significant in the simulations. This kind of approach tends to, to put it bluntly, it's an anti-waffle device. Yeah, it obliges them to focus on what's really important and concentrate on punching 2 or 3 key ideas through that final presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was really good to hear. And is it that it's not that final assessment, but I think you mentioned earlier that there's also kind of a midpoint presentation as well, or did I hear that wrong? And after that midpoint part, you based on the outputs of that, you also then do something back into the simulation to kind of inject cash or put points back in to kind of reflect their success on those activities. Did you say?
Yeah, well, yeah, but basically, I mean, in the written deliverables, we'll ask for a short brief on how they see the strategy over the first 4 years. Yeah. Then, we'll have a more formalized kind of business plan presentation developed mid-game, and then a final deliverable that accompanies this presentation. So yeah, there's three short written deliverables that will accompany. Obviously, I mean, yeah, given that you're working in a 4-day window, having a full, 50, 60, 80-page business plan developed, it's materially, it's not really an option. It's not feasible. So we ask them for something that's short and very to the point, in order to basically act as an initial roadmap, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well.
Yeah. There's one other thing that we integrate, so peer review.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
now this works very well with international students who are much more culturally adept to basically saying truthfully what they felt about their team members. Okay, it's a lot more complex when you're working with a culture like France, where being a snitch is not culturally acceptable, for want of a better term. It's it's linked to the history of who we are, and as an educator saying, well, would you really let someone get away with an inferior level of commitment if your money was on the table? And yeah, you have to work on them to get this to work. But yeah, with an international audience, the peer review tends to be quite an effective measure of performance. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It's not. I think the peer review is really strong, and I'm
Yeah.
always keen that can be kind of brought in where possible, because often when I'm talking to new clients of ours who perhaps are embracing, and deploying simulations for the first time, sometimes there's question marks around, well, what do we do if some of the teammates, for example, aren't happy with their other teammates because they're not putting in the same level of work? And I think the peer review is a really strong way to address that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Drawing things to a close, because we are 5 minutes away from the top of the hour. Um, it would be nice to just say to all our attendees now, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now for Tim to have a look at, and for us both to consider. If you have any more questions later on, then feel free to get in touch, of course. And well, perhaps whilst we're just waiting for maybe some questions to appear in the chat, just perhaps to pick out something I know we've spoken about before, Tim, is you've mentioned something about, yeah, coming back to this student engagement piece, which, it is really the kind of starting point to all of this, isn't it? Like, we're trying to really make the curriculum more engaging for students. Yeah, you've mentioned something about 95% satisfaction ratings where the simulations are used. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
really strong, right? And I wonder, well, perhaps if you could say a little bit about that, and also perhaps how that compares then maybe to either what it was before, or to other courses where simulations aren't used, for example, or, well, whatever you like, really.
Well, I would say that generally speaking, from the information that I get about overall student satisfaction ratings, we're between 80 and 90%. But the simulation-based learning is at the top end of that range. Yeah.
Oh, it's great to hear. Yeah.
Mm.
So typically it's about, yeah, 5% more, or at least then, than the other courses, I would say.
Well, yeah, and on a more informal level, we get students who we've either had in an induction or at the conclusion of a bachelor program, who come back to us and say we should have more of this later in our course, or we should have some of this on the master's programs that we're envisaging enrolling on. So yeah, it does mark it's definitely something which is a part of the the overall student experience and does, contribute positively to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, coming back to what we were saying about inductions as well, that's a really nice way as well, both to get the students starting in a fun way to their education, meeting each other as well, and developing
Hmm.
kind of peer relationships for the rest of their
Hmm.
course, but also setting the scene for what's to come, isn't it, later on in the program, especially
Hmm.
where it's embedded so strongly throughout the levels as well.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, the reaction that we get, particularly on the end of bachelor simulations, is, yeah, now I understand what accounting or marketing or finance or HR management, but the purpose that it serves. Yeah, and yeah, it's a way of bringing together all of these functional disciplines, which a lot of I mean, we try and be as boundary spanning as possible, but there's still a certain number of silos that we have to break down, and I think that these very comprehensive simulation exercises can contribute to breaking down those barriers.
Well, Tim, it's been really great talking to you about this, and yeah, thanks so much for giving up your time. I think actually you've joined us whilst you're taking some vacation as well, so extra thanks
No,
for
I'm
that.
on a training program in Bordeaux. Yeah, it's
Oh, okay, okay, all right. Well, not quite, but yeah, really appreciate your time. It's been really interesting. I'm sure it's been really helpful for all the guest speakers as well.
okay.
Yeah, so thanks a lot.
My pleasure, and look forward to working with you again next week.
Great. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting started again with you.
Okay. Thank you
All
very
right, Tim.
much.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
And
people.
thanks to all the guest speakers. Really appreciate you also giving up your time to join us. Out of your busy working days. So thanks everyone, and we'll let you know in January what we've got in store for our next webinar as well.